Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome. As I said last time, we are focused on the solar ecosystem, and usually that means looking out. However, the Earth is part of the solar ecosystem, and uh, the Overview Roundtable is not about abandoning Earth. In fact, it's about greater awareness of Earth and its needs, and the expectation that if some of us choose to migrate outward, it'll actually benefit the Earth. So, we can't really have this session without at least acknowledging the suffering and the destruction in Los Angeles. And it's not about who caused it or who should have done what. It really isn't. It's just about what it's like to live on Earth right now. And, you know, most of us are Americans, so we're highly aware of LA, but there are terrible things happening all over the world. And we want to make the earth a better place. And I think that's a counterpoint to those who oppose what we're doing because they think we want to get away from the bad stuff and we're abandoning the planet. We're not at all. So I want to say that I've heard from a few of our community members. Loretta is okay. I know she had to evacuate briefly. Rochelle Ellis is still evacuated. She did post a beautiful um, commentary on Facebook today, and it's all about the fact that in the midst of all this, her art is going to the moon.
Hmm.
And it's just kind of cognitive dissonance. Um, yeah, Mike Simmons, I talked to, he's okay. And John Spencer's here and he's okay. But John, kind of give us an overview, quote unquote, of what is going on in LA today.
Sure. Also, Allison and Mark are close to LA, and good to get their perspectives
Yeah, I would.
as
Please.
well. Yeah. Uh, so I actually was born and raised in Los Angeles. Believe it or not, people are actually born and raised in Los Angeles. I mean, my funny thing is I say I made arrangements to be born here to save the moving cost. So, and
Yeah.
I do love LA. It's my city. Um, we've really had a big catastrophe here. We're recovering. We've got incredible support from other states, even other countries. Their firefighting support. We have fleets of aircraft working on the hot spots and kind of getting control. We lucked out a bit last night that Santa Ana winds were not anywhere near the 100-mile-an-hour firestorm we had. So things are getting better. Uh, we have my friends have lost 7 or 8 friends have lost their homes. I've been involved in, of course, design and entertainment industry for a long time. So a lot of the what's called above the line, which is producers, directors, live in the Palisades or Malibu area, and they got hit super hard. So that's really sad. I don't know anyone or any families that lost a member to the family. But like a lot of stuff, it's really a two-edged sword. And by that, I mean it's a catastrophe, but the amount of volunteers and support and materials and goodwill and help that have organically grown is kind of astounding. Wherever you see a really large public parking lot, there are people there bringing donations and giving stuff out, and restaurants and people providing free hot meals to families. There are agencies coming here to help out, FEMA, the whole gang. So this double-edged sword is it's been a really tough time. The air's been terrible. When you go outside, we're wearing masks. We're remnants of COVID. And the real heartbreak is all these young kids who lost their schools, their communities. A lot of them grew up in COVID, and now this. So there's a little extra umph of volunteers and people helping and trying to make things better. So um, when bad things happen, a lot of times good people come forward and help out, and that's what we're seeing on a large growing scale here in LA. So that's very heartening. Um, this shouldn't have happened the way it did. There's people to blame for that. That's going to happen soon. But overall, we're still here. We'll recover. And the positive support by people has been reassuring and amazing and very welcome. So we're still here.
Mhm. Well, we're here for you, John. Is there anything we can do for the LA?
Well, the Red
Sheila?
Cross and other agencies are taking cash donations, whatever, to help not only the victims of the fires, and there's victims when someone loses their home, particularly a large, home over, say, Malibu, or there's a whole community a part of that. There's the gardeners, there's the maids, there's the maintenance people. In some of these situations, there's security people, so assistants. So you could have one place where a family is, say, four, but it affects like 15 people or something like that who lost their jobs, literally. So Red Cross is a good group to donate, goodwill. They all need money. And it's not only going for the victims of the fires, but also the firefighters and first responders. There's
Right.
a whole pyramid of first response. My group, we were in like the third rank and stuff. That's civilian emergency response team. But there is the firefighters on the line. There is the direct support people dealing with hazardous materials, which is a really big deal nobody even thinks about. And then there's other groups. So the firefighters been working their butts off, and
Yeah.
they need sleeping bags. Some of these guys just been out there sleeping on the dirt, for days. Um, and the money helps them get equipment that helps support the firefighters. So that's a really important thing. They're working out ways of charging firefighters phones so they can call their families. So far, we've been super lucky. We haven't lost a single firefighter, which is amazing considering a
Mm.
lot of these guys literally the first few days were literally running for their lives because the fire got behind them and they had to get out and stuff. So
Uh,
we're really, really lucky we haven't lost entire crews. So, but for helping here, it's donations to some of the well-established groups that are helping not only victims, but the firefighters and support people. So that would be helpful.
And also a shout out to the animals and all the pets. The Humane Society of Pasadena is welcoming any donations. I tried to foster a goat or a pig because everyone has already fostered all the cats and dogs. So yeah, they are definitely in need of donations to help all the animals that they have found either in homes that have collapsed and those pets have actually survived, and also wild animals that they have found, and as well as a lot of farm animals, chickens, ducks, goats, pigs, horses. The LA Equestrian Center is where they're housing all the horses, but also farm animals as well. So if you want to make a donation, that's another great place to make a donation. There have been so many volunteers that have been reaching out just to help out with all the animals as well, because there's a lot of suffering happening with our four-legged friends. So this I kind of, in my eyes or my experience, this is like the 9/11 of the West Coast. Like
right.
I was there for 9/11 living in New York City, and this feels so similar. And as John mentioned, so many community members from across Southern California are just coming out to support one another. I have friends that have lost homes. My cousin has 5 individual friends that have lost 5 homes. I have friends that are evacuated. It's just a really, really
Yeah.
sad, tragic situation.
Yeah. And yet it brings out the best in humans. So
Yeah,
And
we are
I've had
that's a great point about the animals. I mean, they really need help too, and people are
Yeah.
helping out. I'm glad you brought that up. Humane Society is fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
I have quite a few friends who have lost everything. One friend was able to get out of his house with the clothes he was wearing and one laptop. That was it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
on a happier note, I just got off a video call with my 1-day-old grandchild, and
Goes on, Dan.
Hi, congratulations.
his name is Finn Curry. They wanted to give him something from Irish folklore, and also wanted to introduce my friend Bruce Long, who is joining us for the first time. And Bruce and I were partners know him from Technicolor and many other projects in the film industry. And Bruce can kind of talk. I'd like Bruce to mention we're embarking on a new project that I think has significant the potential for significant impact in the world. And I think Bruce, if you would please just talk a little bit about your project.
Thank you. I know we're moving into the conversation with the other Bruce on this call, and I apologize for the confusion in the beginning. I have a background in production and visual effects. I've got 5 dozen patents to my name at this point, and today's probably not the day to bring this up, but I'm working on a project called Planet Horizon, which is an immersive project that focuses on the overview experience. So obviously it's very relevant for this group, and I'm very excited to share that with you guys when the time is right. I'm just honored to join you guys, and I share the values and the moral dilemma that we're all facing, and I'm here to be a part of that solution.
Well, Bruce Long, we'll have you back to give us more, and you and Dan tell us more about that project for sure.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Mark?
Couple of perspectives on the fire that I thought might interest this group in particular. In fact, I can make this a little bit visual and share my screen here. But my personal connection to it, my brother had to evacuate Hollywood Hills Tuesday, but they got that under control and he came back. But my sort of personal connection to dig into this was the very special house my mom grew up in Altadena. It was handmade. You could see the thumbprints and the bricks and that sort of thing. This is it just a couple of years ago on Google Maps. We don't know the people that live there now, so I mean, nobody in my family was threatened in this situation, but we could watch on watch duty the fire come down, and we could see that night, this is the house. It came right into that block. And it's worth noting just south of here is the police station and the fire station. And that particular night, Michael Sheets posted a bunch of satellite imagery from Maxar, I guess it's called. And that's the block. And you can see there is some space surrounding this house, and it's black, and you get the sense that maybe it didn't burn. By the way, the Mount Wilson Observatory is just north of this map. JPL is just west of this map. 200 JPLers have lost their home.
Oh my God.
So JPL is okay, the observatory is okay, but 200 people who work on the JPL campus lost their home. So this is not like, I mean, this picture is a mind-blowing level of devastation, but kind of similar to what John was saying. We've got Earth observation satellites now, and we got 100,000 people plus out of the way. And it's kind of miraculous how few people were caught by this fire.
Yeah.
In part, because the kind of technologies everybody here is passionate about. For what it's worth, it did keep burning. This is the house in this picture, and it did take out the sheriff's station and the fire department. It burned the library. North of this is my mom's entire childhood neighborhood. The other house she grew up in, the elementary school, the park she put, like, it's all gone. And so, like a lot of people today, she's dealing with the fact she can't go back there. And for many of you who know and love Ron Rosano and his wife, she grew up in Pacific Palisades, and same thing, lost her entire childhood neighborhood, just completely gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's been posting pictures of the pool they used to swim in and and it's just gone. And so everybody here, I'm safe in Irvine. We're 50 miles from any of it, and we have beautiful blue skies because all the smoke's being blown out to sea. But everybody here, lost something or knows somebody who lost something. It's kind of sobering.
Well, thank you, Mark. We'll be in touch with Ron. I really hadn't thought about that. I didn't know he had a connection to LA. Okay, well, there
One
may
last note on the fire. Last night I was appalled watching the news, and they were interviewing that cerebral giant Tommy Tuberville and the Squeaker of the House, and they both said that, especially Tuberville, someone who has lacked any respect on my part, has said California doesn't deserve any disaster help until they change their bad behavior.
Right. Right. Yeah, I said it brings out the best in us, but of course it brings out the worst. So
Yeah,
yeah.
he's a colostomy bag with feet.
What a horrible image. Anyway, um, yeah, so we're in this kind of split personality situation. We have to go on. We have to keep living. We have to keep working. And we did want to have Bruce and Aza, and I want to tell you, Greg Barr is here from the Human Space Program. Greg is our treasurer. He's a board member, team member, and he's been deeply involved in this project, SHEP. And so we want to move on and talk about the ideas that are percolating with SHEP, and I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to Aza, who will turn it over to Bruce. So Aza, it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Fort family. This has been actually a really wonderful journey that got seated about a year ago. I was in on some calls with Frank and Greg and Kevin, who have kind of been along for the Shepherd SHEP ride for just over a year. And we were looking at simulation work, and we're talking about how we could deindustrialize Earth. And I was bringing my whole vision for the Eden Foundation, the Earth Dynamics Evaluation Network. And it was this intersection of like, how do we move out, but also how do we care for our pale blue dot? And after one of those sessions, it was really interesting. The next morning, very with synchronicity and serendipity, I somehow stumbled upon Bruce's original Shepherd talk, TED talk from 2015. And when I watched that talk, thinking about ORT and thinking about the mission for the Human Space Program, I just got this hit that there was something deep in Bruce's work that I had to investigate. So I sort of started chasing Bruce to figure out where SHEP was at, what was going on. And the ending slide for his presentation is actually a quote I want to share, because I think it sort of encapsulates so much of the vision. Bruce said at the end of that talk, our civilization is a symbiosis between all of humanity and all of life. Our future lies in this most radical collaboration. And I was like, wow, everything we do on Earth and everything we do out into space it really comes down to kind of this ethos and this radical collaboration, especially as we venture out into the solar ecosystem. So it's been about a year of kind of thinking and connecting, and finally was able to get a hold of Bruce, and we've had a lot of calls with Kevin and Greg, and it's really amazing about a year later to be able to actually have Bruce present and talk about the vision of how SHEP can sort of fit into the Human Space Program and its vision and its goals. And what I really loved about Shepherd, which is now called SHEP, is Bruce said the goal for SHEP is to provide a universal technology to open the solar system to sustainable spaceflight, and beyond that to large-scale human colonization in space. So there's this amazing, amazing vision of how we start to venture out. And the way that I look at SHEP is it's actually kind of the steps, or sort of like the connective tissue for all the technology and all of the things that we need to do as we venture out. So it's actually a real honor, after all these conversations for a year, to have Dr. Bruce Damer here. And Bruce is a polymath and just an amazing human being with such a big heart. He's the founder of Digital Space. He's the chief scientist at the Biota Institute, which is all about the origins of life work. And recently, he's the president and co-founder of the Center for Minds, which is all about using psychedelics to expand and have new novel discoveries. And he's also the chief visionary behind SHEP. So it's actually my pleasure to welcome Bruce to ORT and to talk about this vision. So Bruce, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Aza and Frank and the whole HSB community. And I want to also let you know, we here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I can just show you a little bit of a view out the window. That's our farm is from the 1870s. And we were evacuated for 3 weeks as the CZU lightning complex fire raged in Bonnie Doon and took many houses, I think, including Robert Heinlein's original house. And it was over 2,000 degrees, and it ripped through Big Basin, the first state park. And now we have pencil-thin redwoods with little fuzz on them, including 250-foot old growth. It's a very different reality. It's like the 21st century redwood. And we came back after 3 weeks finding embers, burnt out embers, just all over the property, the buildings and the decks and things like that. And so it was a near miss for us.
Wow.
So we really, the whole community, the valley, San Lorenzo Valley, was in PTSD for about 3 years, I think. And rebuilding has been extremely slow, maybe about 10%. Basically, the Bonnie Doon area is mostly depopulated at this point. So that's, hopefully it's not a look forward into what happens in Los Angeles. We hope that they rebuild those communities in some spectacular new way of living in the 21st century with like built-in water reservoirs and parks and green belts. This could be done. It's an opportunity to show the world how to live in this century.
Thank you, Bruce, for that.
Yeah. Well, with all that, I'll share my screen and get going. And let's see, it's this one here. And I want to dedicate this presentation. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
I want to dedicate the presentation to someone very important who left us 2 years ago, and that's Jim Finero, who founded Contact. And he left too soon, and this entire concept happened at a Contact conference, the whole coming together of the partnership. So just a little bit of a call out to Contact and its mission of 25 years. If many of you know that group and the annual meeting. So just very briefly, the SHEP acronym has been shifting around, and this is the new one as of 2 days ago. It used to stand for Secure Handling through Encapsulation of Planetesimals on Earth Moon Retrograde Delivery, because it was designed for the NASA asteroid redirect mission back in 2014. We've really generalized it. So the latest rendition is SHEP, Secure Handling through Encapsulated Pneumatics, describing the actual technology itself, designed for asteroid ISRU and transformation, and on the way to asteroids, debris handling, and satellite servicing. And this is one of the most encouraging signs for us, is there's been a very keen interest in this as a cash business that will serve humanity on the way to asteroid resources, which is kind of, it's in a very much of winter. Everything is focused on lunar resources at the moment. So without further ado, and we also, as a bit of introduction, put this forward to you, of course, through Greg, Aza, and others, that this could be a candidate designed for HSP's citizen authorized blueprint for conscious space migration and stewardship in a solar system ecosystem. So we're really putting this forward to you. And this is open source. At the end of my TEDx talk in 2015, I work in patent litigation work as one of my little sub jobs. And I realized if I absolutely put this out in public, including the design aspects, it will actually protect the basic concept, the basic framework, and I basically I give this to humanity. So this is truly it's a group thing. It's a network. This is going to be a network build anyway. So we've got 4 sections. We've got the big picture, which is a bit of the history, the innovation itself, and how it could work, and if it does work. The technical details for the space nerds, engineers, aerospace people among us, and a bit of the path of development. So let's, without further ado, the big picture. You all remember these articles in 1952 to 54 in Collier's. This is von Braun and Chesley Bonestell. And the cover of the April 1954 issue was, "Can we get to Mars?" And if you look at Bonestell's painting, there are tankers in the orbit in Mars, right? Von Braun and his team really had an idea of what would be needed even before anything had flown into space. Just amazing. And of course, they're trying to avoid recessions and et cetera, same issues we've got. So in 1968, the visionaries for the 21st century saw our future in space in the film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Here we are all the way out in 2025, and this is what we have created, a station for, I think, up to 7 or 8 crew rather than a 200-person Hilton hotel. So something is really kind of holding us back, clearly. A little bit of my background. My youthful passion started when I got connected to Space Studies Institute in about 1977. Started getting their newsletters. I joined as a senior associate on my high school salary, lawn mowing salary. But it was a wonderful connection. And through that, I started giving talks about the upcoming shuttle program. I started writing articles for the local newspaper on asteroid redirect, solar sails, solar power. So this is an article, I think, from 79 that I put together and sketched out. And happily, and I came up with this idea of reaction capture of mass drivers, rocks that were thrown off of asteroids could be captured somewhere else as a thrust force. I sent this to Gerard O'Neill, and I got a nice letter back. This is about 1978. Happily for me, I managed to make my way into the space industry, and I did 15 years with a team called Digital Space. We did many designs, I think 35 projects for NASA, Honeybee, Lockheed Martin, ESA, you name it. One of our biggest projects was the reference design for how to take humans to the surface of an asteroid, the first target beyond the moon. And I put this all together in an afternoon with people from Johnson Space Center. And then we did all the renderings, and it went to the administrator, actually. So this is 2007. And in some sense, it helped redirect NASA back to asteroids when Obama came in. Around that time, New Space was getting going. Here's Elon with a Falcon 9. Bigelow's doing their inflatables. Starship was on the being sketched out, including taking Red Dragon to Mars. So this was all kind of getting going. Today, and hopefully, I guess, did Ship 7 launch or Starship 7 launch? I guess this afternoon.
Yeah, so, 5 o'clock this afternoon. Eastern.
5 o'clock. Yeah. So this is where we're looking today. Fully reusable heavy lift, projected to go to the moon and Mars. But there's one problem, which is this: you probably need to have refueling, recharging stations on the way. So here's the metaphor. If you were to drive you want to drive a nice big heavy truck from Los Angeles to New York without gas stations on the way, you'd need to haul a big tanker section on your truck, a lot of fuel you're carrying around. So gas stations really are a good thing. And this is the current plan, or one of sort of the conceptions of a fuel depot that SpaceX is going to actually start to test out. critics, this is the critic, I think, from some of the competition, the complexity of doing this 16 super heavy refuel launch to fuel the depot to just get to the moon and back. So there's some order of complexity in this compared to Apollo, of course, a single launch, right? To get they're getting a very large spacecraft compared to the LEM to the moon. But this is one of the criticisms. Getting to Mars with a presumption of cracking fuel out of the atmosphere in the Martian regolith is even more of a complexity. So you're looking at actually booking in major industrial infrastructure onto the surface of Mars in order to make this mission possible. In fact, the landed mass of the atmospheric processors or soil processors might be much larger than the actual human mission or the Starship for Mars. So, and it'll be very, very error prone in a long-term development process. All my friends in mining, my brother's a mining guy. He drives a haul truck in Canada. When I show him teleoperated mining operations for Moon and Mars, he just laughs at me and says, this stuff's going to break immediately. Where is the Sani hut for the guys and the pile of spare parts to keep the telerobotic system going? So it's a catch-22 in a way, right? But how to solve this problem? Well, there are abundant volatiles in space. If we're looking for volatiles first, here's a comet, comet tails, meteor showers are a lot of volatiles burning up in our atmosphere. And of course, the ESA mission to the comet characterized those volatiles in abundance. The further you get out, the more icy stuff you get rather than hydrated minerals closer in LEOs. So asteroid mining came onto the scene about, I think, 12, 15 years ago. The image on the right was from, I think, Space Resources or one of the two companies. It's a complete nonsensical projection of having a factory bolted onto an asteroid with bulk materials. Talking to Peter Janiskins in the early days, he said that no one ever came to the asteroid astronomers to ask them about the geotechnical properties of these objects because they would never have put out sketches like this. More recently, Joel Sarcel at Transastra came up with optical mining, basically hitting the object with sunlight and splitting off spallings, which would then release hydrated, from the hydrated minerals, release vapor that then they collect. This is a major, both these solutions are major problems, mainly because, as Peter Janiskins points out, and he's my colleague at SETI Institute, who studies asteroids day and night, goes and picks them up when they land on the Earth. Asteroids are friable. Material is basically they're consolidated rubble piles for the most part. They come apart, and there's a huge debris hazard risk. You'd have to have diverse, heavy equipment to do bulk material processing of them. And the teleoperations, if you're not doing it with crew, are hugely problematic. So high cost, high risk going this way, grinding stuff up and trying to smelt it or crack volatiles out of it. So what's an alternative? Well, it's kind of a conundrum. And at the Contact Conference in 2014, I met Peter Janiskins. He was a replacement speaker. And I had started sketching out this idea of a fabric enclosure around an asteroid that you could release volatiles, icy volatiles into, and somehow then trap them, condense them, capture them. I was standing outside the Contact Conference, and I didn't know who he was. He didn't have a badge. I showed him on my phone, I showed him this design, and he said, "Oh, that'll never work." I thought, uh-oh, maybe I have an expert here. I said, "Who are you?" And he described his job at SETI Institute. I said, "I'm busted. My concept has been falsified." And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Let's go to lunch." And we went to the fish house, had a bowl of clam chowder. And at the end of his bowl of clam chowder, he looked up and said, "I figured out how to make it work." And I said, "What, really?" He said, what we do is we bring an enclosure to the asteroid. Now, this, given the idea that this was the background was NASA's asteroid redirect mission, proposals were going out and LOIs were coming back. He said the problem with that is if you have a hard bag closure, as you see in the solution below, the asteroids they're rotating and spinning, and they will rip you apart. They're going to be much more massive to the spacecraft. So that is just not going to work. So you can't touch them. You have to somehow handle them without making physical contact. And my initial sketch that I showed Peter had a little gantry that would attach to the NEO, or the near Earth object. And this is the one he sort of threw out. But at the end of the lunch, he said, I figured out how to make it work. We bring the gas to the NEO, or the NEA, and we use the gas entirely to manage it. Friction with the gas will detumble and despin it in the enclosure. And then we could possibly even use jets and pumps and ducts to direct force at it and start mobilizing it, start doing delta V on it. So this was the sketch after our meeting on 26th of April, 2014, to sort of the initial concept sketch. He contacted his friend Julian Knott, whoops, there's Julian in the lower right, who is a balloon designer, who designed the Red Bull balloons and held 79 world records. And he and I put together the sketches for an actual extensible balloon design to encapsulate the object. And what I want to do is show you a short animation that depicts how SHEP, then called Shepherd, would operate. So here it is. This is from 10 years ago. So here we are coming up. We're doing a LiDAR 3D shape model scan of the object. Very, very slow operations. This is sped up vastly. We wouldn't be doing things this quickly. We move the enclosure forward and we pull down the front bow section onto a plug, a self-sealing plug, to hopefully get 100% gas seal. Inject a 1/10 of an atmosphere of the controlling gas, which might be helium. And that will, in a matter of days, detumble, get the object into a stationary position. We can then start doing a driving phase, a sub 1 Newton force, and start doing delta V to relocate the object. So that's the basic idea. So what can we do with that kind of grab bag solution? Well, there are a lot of known and unknown resource targets in the solar system. Here's one map of things that actually have been imaged or targeted. Some of them are blowing off material. So it's either a cometary, old cometary nucleus, or actually wet NEOs that when facing sunward, they blow off volatiles. The farther out you go past Mars, you get more and more ice content. Then we, of course, this is at Hayden Planetarium in New York City. We have beautiful nickel iron objects. So we've got all kinds of resource, carbonaceous, stony, metallic. So how would we get fuels from these objects? Well, what we could do is encapsulate them. And as you'll see later, rotate the enclosure. We light the enclosure with solar power collection on the outside on the blanket. And we light the enclosure, and so we can see what we're doing. We're constantly imaging. We're doing prox ops with it. And we can heat up the enclosure just by simply rotating the spacecraft so we get a black absorptive surface toward the sun, gradually heat the interior, which will heat the object and start blowing off below the dust crust that is on these types of NEAs. Or actually, they're not even NEA. This would be quite far from the Earth. We'll start sublimating the volatiles out, which then could be collected through ductwork after accounting for a lot of dust. And using cold plate technology, we could just basically condense the water, and if we had CO2, and separate it into tanks. And then this tanker section becomes self-powered, because we've done electrolysis and we've produced some propulsive material, and then we can just literally take that to where it needs to be. A SHEP minor space attorney in Houston came up with this for us. He said, "Don't y'all know about the Mond process?" I said, "What's that?" It's in 1890, Pierre Mond put a hunk of nickel into a vacuum chamber and put carbonyl gas, CO, into the chamber. It ran an electric current across it, and it can basically do what's called electroforming, which is to take individual ions of the metal and plate it onto what's called a mandrel and create high precision 3D parts, if you can get access to the metals this way. So this is smelting without smelting. You're going to a native metal source. And SHEP Bio, which is my favorite, I came up with it about 2 months after that, which is, hey, let's not sublimate all the volatiles out. Let's create a liquid globule. The rocky material will fall to the center. It'll sort of self-organize, and we can inoculate it and use it as a biosphere, kind of like Dorian Sagan's idea of biospheres. And we can extract basically foodstuffs, all kinds of material into these sections and deliver those to wherever they need to be. So this creates a totally different way to go to Mars, for example, because beforehand we've created the fueling station or fueling stations from beyond the snow line prior to departure. So we can refuel in orbit, we can refuel for return, we can provide fuel for landing, and we can also provide even foodstuffs, crew consumables. So with resupply from orbit, instead of trying to do it from the surface of Mars or the moon, you could have a lot more activity. You could build a lot more infrastructure, lower cost per ton. And as far as the O'Neill vision, Gerard O'Neill's vision, we could potentially then build megastructures because we can potentially do 3D printing in space and supply a larger build for something in space, as we saw in 2001. So could this be a sustainably viable space architecture to open the solar system for exploration and habitation? This was the little sketch we did about a decade ago to show how that might happen. So the technical details for the nerdy people. First off, this is, we submitted Shepard, the then Shepard, to the BAA, the broad agency announcement, for a $500,000 project to do vacuum chamber testing of our seal closure. That's what we put forward. And we didn't get selected, but we got really good feedback from the evaluation. So they considered it highly relevant and highly novel. No other concepts have been included: keeping the asteroid in a pressurized container, lower impact force, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really good feedback, and they rated it good, and they identified low maturity, of course, in the system. The seals were, seal closure hadn't been really done. So there it is. So we were sort of set at TRL2. Subsequently, we published the first article in New Space Journal. This was in April of 2015. So this is actually sort of where we got it into the literature, and you can look that up pretty easily. And it turns out that inflatables have a deep heritage in space. Here's Echo at NASA Ames in Hangar 1 in probably 1960 before a launch. Amazingly, Echo 1 and 2 lasted for years in orbit, and they were one of the first attempts to do a communication satellite technology. Just an amazing, it's a very large balloon. So this is even really before Telstar. Think about that. And more recently, Bigelow has invested heavily in this direction with Genesis 1 and 2, still in orbit, I think still pressurized. They didn't have a depressurization event. And that led to the high TRL rating, and the beam module is just now on station. So we have some real maturity here. So this is Julian Knott's work. Unfortunately, he passed away about 5 years ago in a ballooning accident near San Diego. It was incredibly tragic to lose our third team member. But these are his concepts with an outer and inner envelope. This is the world's greatest. This is the Phineas Fogg of our time, the world's greatest balloon designer, with air beams that make it rigid and has ductwork and blisters. So this is how it kind of would look in cross section. This is a blister design that he came up with, which would have vents, return vents, thrusters, lighting cameras, and autonomous LiDAR for prox ops, where we can monitor where the object is. I won't go through this in detail, but these are some of the geeky things that Peter Janiskins and Stuart Pillars worked out at SETI Institute. We did a shape model with 2008 TC3, a known shape of an asteroid that re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, and it tumbled and despun it in 1/10 of a Earth atmosphere in 24 hours in computational fluid dynamics simulation. Pretty cool. So at least in simulation, it seemed to do that initial job of getting it to be stationary. So as you saw in the animation, you would find your target, shape model it, capture it, and the enclosure, trying to get that seal closure. So key issue is the sealing. Balloonists have self-sealing material that if you shoot a gun through it, like a shotgun, if a farmer takes a rifle shot at a balloon, it will seal. I don't know if you knew that about balloons. Julian proposed this one area where we would pull everything down to a plug or use a cylinder, but we could also transverse or longitudinal sealing or opening. He had a number of designs that I still have. You have a pawl and ratchet and a cinch rope, Vectran material, really, pretty cool thinking, for all done in a month, so we could send it into NASA. Then exterior envelope would generate your power and do your thermal management. So just based on the color, the absorptiveness of the material on the exterior balloon, you could then rotate this sunward and manage your thermal and generate a lot of power. So this is what we came up with. This is Peter's idea of the handling and mobilization in the driving phase. This is some of his work for a poster we did for NASA meeting. And this is some of his feasibility calculations on the pneumatic management itself within the enclosure. We would probably use xenon gas for the spacecraft to get it out there, ion propulsion, but then we could switch to the volatiles that we capture later on. Path of development, last section. This was work done with Carlos Calva in 2018, 2019, where we really wanted to focus on the other capacities for Shepard, which was autonomous handling of both space debris and satellites and live satellites for servicing, because that was emerging as a business or as an investment area for both DARPA, DoD, and ESA. So I actually flew to Luxembourg to present this to Luxembourg Space Agency, and they had just been burned by the failure of one of the asteroid mining companies in their own parliament that had come up. So they were less interested in that, but very interested in near-Earth operations like that. So our development path was for simulation and testing chambers, and then CubeSats, flying a couple of 3U, 4U, 8U CubeSats to test the concept in low Earth orbit, and then satellite servicing or graveyarding, and then go for a NEO capture experiment. So here's sort of the vision of the SHEP cube, and inflating our enclosure with a pre-installed asteroid simulation or space junk or something, and then attempting through jets to manage its position from these blisters. So that would be an early demonstration mission. the immediate applications, the demonstrating the relocation of, say, a dead sat, even to the point where we use the driving gas, the pneumatic handling to put it into a perturbed transfer orbit and release it for reentry. So we can actually take it out of the Earth orbit system altogether. And then sort of the most glamorous would be to have Dragon with a crew, and the crew are shown here doing some servicing on a big satellite, which is, this is scale independent. They could have big booms on it just to have a bigger enclosure. If you had a Earth atmosphere, these guys wouldn't have to have backpacks on. They could be, in their underwear with a tool belt. And of course, you could safely handle hydrazine issues and that kind of a thing. So this could be another demonstration mission on the way to asteroid ISRU. So proposed next steps, this is where I'm going to wrap it up. Greg has been working on a proposed agreement to work with human space program, including a charrette, which is an exercise where you get people together on a multi-day mission to undertake the technical and economic viability of a program, kind of like the stuff we would do at JPL in their lab, where they look at a complete mission design from scratch. And we recently had a call with Angel at Space Resources Roundtable and the Space Resources Division at Colorado School of Mines. And I've been part of the conference there for many, many years. And he's quite keen on involving their academic network there as participants potentially in the charrette. And Aza has been in touch with and actually applied for an ESRIC ESA grant earlier this year. We didn't get selected, but they do have this startup support program. So we're now looking at that. And finishing off, the HSP blueprint process itself seems to be really well tuned to the needs of evaluating this design concept. I want to give the team credits here. By the way, there's an image we did for the cover of New Space 10 years ago that they didn't use, but I always put it up. It's showing the release of an asteroid into lunar orbit, creating a moon around the moon. And the 2014 to 2019 team, I think of this as phase one or the initiating team. These are all the people, two of them no longer with us, including Brad Blair. And the current team, which will hopefully soon be growing for sort of SHEP phase two. It's SHEP's next life is listed there. And I just want to thank everyone for your patience in listening to all this detail, and look forward to discussion.
Terrific, Bruce. Thank you so much. If you want to stop sharing screen, I think rather than at the moment jumping into small groups, let's have an open-ended conversation. And if we run out of gas or out of asteroid material, whatever, we will go into small groups. But this is unique. We have Bruce here. We have Aza here. We rarely have Greg here because he has a job and he has to be there most of the time. So I'd like to throw it open for questions. I will just comment, Bruce and everybody. I had a flashback. I got started at the Space Studies Institute as well. And this reminded me of an SSI session. There were lots of presentations, a lot of detail about how we could do things. And I really had a very pleasant sensation of going back in time to those days, which were very, very exciting. So let's have questions, answers, insights, comments. So it's open.
I thought that was a spectacular presentation, really thoughtfully planned out to how we can become a solar system-wide civilization. And it's particularly relevant to a project that I'm working on and Bruce is involved with too.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So I learned so much from this presentation. So thank you very much for doing that.
I think it's terrific that it's being made open source as well. Really changes the dynamic of something like this. More comments, more questions.
Please go ahead. Excuse me.
Yeah, I have a question about like one of the last moments in which you mentioned the possibility of releasing the asteroid in the orbit. I believe it was on the moon. And like, what are the risks? Because it's like little scary. Sometimes we have like a satellite, like pieces of like space debris falling for somebody's houses. And of course, like the intention is for this asteroid probably to orbit for a while, but what if things are wrong? Like, can you talk more about the risks?
Yeah, actually, there's actually another I didn't even discuss aspect to SHEP, which is planetary defense. Because as you know, if we do identify something coming our way, if it's quite small, like that, the rock that you saw there in the depiction was, that could have created something like Meteor Crater in Arizona if it was a solid. But often these things are very friable, and something like that coming into the atmosphere just break up into pieces, and it would be like the Siberian. That was, I think, about 3 or 4 meters. So one of the things with all of that is everything's very slow. So that it takes years to do that, to make that relocation. So you wouldn't really see it as a weapon by anybody. It would be such a slow weapon. Be like sending a slug across enemy lines. But if something was actually orbiting the moon, it would really stay orbiting the moon. And in fact, that's one of the arguments for cislunar space being a nice, stable place to do things over the long term. So, but think of in 50 years, 250 years, maybe humanity does identify kind of a dinosaur killing type impact risk. We have very few choices. One of them is gravity tractoring that B612 has been working on with Rusty Schweikart. But SHEP is another option to really securely, gradually change that orbit so that it's a near miss instead of a direct impact, something that might be a mile across, or 4 or 5 miles across, and you have a real problem. So it's insurance for us in that sense.
I was just gonna thank you and agree with Dan's perspective. It's been extremely, just sitting and listening to your thoughts and your vision. It's extremely enervating. And I just wanted to say, without bringing the meeting to a crass, inappropriate place, that I have a background besides being a bit of a scientist and an inventor. I have a background as a venture capitalist. And I'm grateful that you've taken the time and the thought to help put a silver lining of how we'll pay for this, because it seems like we're moving into, especially no surprise with this administration, a bit of a stark reality that the space travel has to be paid for by some quote unquote blue sky opportunity. And I think there's a hell of a lot more blue sky opportunities in space than we talk about and that get put into the media. And so part of what I'd want to bring to this communication and to this discussion is ways to proliferate some of the potential there so that we can put some flags in the ground that say, this is why we're going to do this, and this is a no-brainer reason to make this investment. The ROI, as crazy as that sounds, is viable. And I think the research to do that is as meaningful, but undersourced and undervalued today. So thank you for taking the time to shine a light on that.
One of the discussions we had over the years is friends over at Lockheed Martin and at the DoD. So I think the DoD, they say they have a keyhole satellite that's completely out of fuel. It's like, $6 billion taxpayer investment, very valuable to them.
Yeah.
And they would really like to have servicing technology. So they've been funding all kinds of studies, and it's one possibility. I mean, if the DoD could use a SHEP sat solution to go and take crew up there to do this very dramatic refueling, or they could do a robotic refueling, just encapsulate, because it's tumbling. That's one of the issues. And get it back online, extend the life. And we're talking about extending the life of, all the ComSats and Earth imaging satellites, and also getting some of them out of geostationary into graveyard because it's getting crowded up there, and dealing with the space debris issue, and especially the impact collision. When we see, two things collide, they produce just a tremendous amount of high speed, high impact, unpredictable, projectiles. So gently avoiding those sorts of, and learning to manage our environment for the future. The consequences of not doing it are, what is the name of the effect? The Kessler effect that we saw in the film Gravity.
Yep, that's it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. David Chauvin.
Yeah, hi, Bruce. Appreciate your presentation. It's fascinating. One of the things I wanted to follow up on is if you've looked at how this might be able to reduce demand for launch of any kind of materials from the Earth, and the effect of that being able to substitute those launches with some of these in-space resources could affect things like environment, CO2 release from all the launches and so forth. I know we've had the drive towards lower cost launch and increasing launch capacity and capabilities and more spaceports and all of this. But one of the things that I had looked at, regardless of what the source was for propellants and other materials, is to be able to reduce the demand of launching those things from the Earth. And one of the things that came out of the NASA space solar power study that they did was they did an assessment of how much CO2 was being released by all the launches, assuming everything for a space solar power satellite was being mined from the Earth, processed on the Earth, launched from the Earth, and assembled in space with conventional approaches. So, how might CO2 reduction offsets enter into the equation for this?
I think that the primary is going to be fuels, fuels and water and human consumables, because also if you're going to the moon, you're going beyond the moon, you're outside of the protection of our magnetosphere. And you need, in some studies, up to, a meter, 2 meters of water envelope is a way to protect crew. So you need a lot of volatiles. Humans consume vast amounts of fresh water on a daily basis. I think it's 150 liters per household, just even in the UK. It's a lot. And so we can't really afford to both lift the fuels and all those other consumable volatiles that are available throughout the solar system. One of the more poetic sides of things that came to me about a decade ago was I work on the origin of life, which is the early protocells, like little membranous fatty acid containers forming in hot spring pools, undergoing wet-dry cycling. And Graham Lau, who's on this call, is quite familiar with this work. And it struck me that, oh my goodness, the way that a species begins, or the way that life begins on a planet, which is membranous enclosure on a vast scale with transpiration and energy collected across the membrane, the Shepherd solution is potentially the same metaphor for the way life buds off or expands beyond the womb of its home world, its initial world. It's the same principle. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm working on the same technical solution. One 4 billion years ago and one maybe in the next century. It's the same solution. And that what you do, and I think Dorian Sagan was correct, you make new worlds. And you can make new worlds with an L5 colony type huge construction, right? And the deindustrialization of the Earth, that type of a thing. But there's a way to do it even earlier, which is to turn these asteroid materials into worlds themselves. And the way you do it is to put an atmosphere around them. And then it chemically alters how they behave and the things that can happen with them. So we really can create new biospheres. I think it's not too far-fetched. And then from that basis, we can create megastructures, which is where we really can, we're not going to build the axiom for everybody from Wall-E, but we're going to build megastructures, I think, or I would agree with Jerry O'Neill more than using planetary or lunar surfaces to expand civilization. I think it's megastructures in space. This is a personal bias.
I really tend to agree with that. I mean, at HSP, we try to just listen to everybody. You want to go to Mars, okay, we'll hear you out. But personally, I'm very concerned about the moon and Mars and people attempting to put too much industry, too many people on those surfaces and not respecting those planets in their current reality. The problem is when I bring this up, people say, oh yeah, I've heard about O'Neill. It doesn't sound feasible. It's kind of science fiction-y. Nobody listens to that anymore, do they? But maybe if we can refresh O'Neill in the way you're doing it, Bruce, we can actually convince them that we don't want to be deindustrializing Mars 100 years from now, is my point. So I think we need a new argument. And this looks like it to me.
One of the opportunities we have is if we do a really excellent job on the hypothesis and the modeling, the simulation, the economics, through mutual friends. I'm fairly well connected with Elon Musk. And 2 years ago at a dinner with him, where for the majority of the dinner, we just talked about World War II stories. I brought this up as he wanted to ask me if we land significant presence on Mars, will we sort of contaminate a Mars biosphere? So I talked about how they would be endolithic, rock-loving halophiles, salt-loving extremophiles. And it was probably the surface is very sterilizing. So if you dumped your bilge, it would just get sterilized and probably not make its way into the Martian biosphere if there was one. And so he was just curious about that and about how life might have started on Mars. But I sketched this out in broad terms for him, saying that there's a team that's working on a solution which will be general purpose. It will provide fueling stations. It will provide even mineral extraction, foodstuffs, something to do with asteroidal material. And I didn't want to get into details because I didn't want to just get a summary rejection or just sort of hand waving. I wanted to come to him with something realistic. And he said, it sounds really interesting. Would you bring me a model that shows how I can lower my cost per ton to the surface of Mars? And then we'll take a serious look at it. Mm-hmm. So that was his metric. So he's very much committed to trying to do something big on the surface of Mars. And of course, Starship is now flying. It's going to need fuel. It's going to be a customer if it keeps succeeding, and there's an actual market for Starship doing things. So we have an opening there. We potentially also have an opening with Jeff Bezos over at Blue Origin because he's very much a fan of O'Neill. So there's a couple of, so for this effort, we do have a potential customer, at least a listening ear that can take it internally into their teams and really take it apart. And I have a number of friends that are involved in both companies, even at the board level. So there's definitely, to whom I presented this. So there's definitely an openness and a curiosity. And I realized at that time, there's no way I was going to start a company we use the term flow space as a working title for the working group. It's not a company. And it just became more clear this needs to be a community. It needs to be a group effort. And it strikes me, it's like we're at such a pivotal time that we could take this in, and it might turn out to be falsifiable. It might turn out not to work at all, or there's some gotcha. But we're maybe at a new Collier's moment where we can do, and this is where, to the other Bruce Long here, and I know Aza has been thinking about the For All Mankind series, because the last time they showed asteroids being redirected, they threw a cable around it and it became a catastrophic event. If Shepard got depicted in For All Mankind, or in some of the efforts you want to do in a beautiful way, but in a very engineering, scientifically backed kind of a way, that's how you get a vision out. You know, the Collier's articles really set the stage for the space age, and they still are, amazingly.
All right.
So the great artists and the great engineers working together, that's what we could do in this century.
Thank you, Bruce. I think Dan Curry and I definitely, as he alluded to, in the project that I'm helping him, the series we're helping create, will definitely at least try to tackle, as Star Trek did, some of the more appropriate disciplines associated with these efforts, so that we shed a light on at least the status of how far we've come in each of those areas. And I think today was incredibly inspiring for me, and it also gave me insight as to what Dan Curry is thinking and why he's developed the project the way he has. I think, just speaking for myself, I worked at Technicolor in the R&D group at Technicolor, and we seemed to be very distracted by near-term solutions and short-term solutions. And the challenge in venture capital has always been to find a happy balance between long-term and near-term. And I think that the vision that you're sharing today and that everyone shares in this meeting is about finding the midterm vision, because the near-term vision is not doable. The long-term vision is just that. We have to find the intermediate steps. And I find it really illuminating and exciting that we're getting close to being able to visualize and begin to test the in-between steps. And I'm fascinated by the idea of what has been treated as trash or throwaways for our society now becoming, just like on the Earth, in space, becoming things that we can reuse and potentially harness the power from. So I love all that.
Kevin, I should have mentioned earlier, Kevin has also been deeply involved in the project, and he has a comment.
Well, I wanted to say that thank you so much, Bruce. Always great to hear the story again in a different way with new updates. And something that the group that I'm excited about is that the way that all these connections go back 25, 30 years, and that Greg Barr met Bruce back at Contact. And Greg, you'll have to tell us the year, but a long, long, long time ago. And so when Aza brought Bruce back to HSP, and then I realized when Bruce was at JSC and digital space, we had connected in the early 2000s around avatars, because he was doing some really important work around avatars in synthetic environments. And I never forgot, he told me, he's like, Kevin, he wrote, and you don't remember this, Bruce, but if you're trying to make a career out of avatars in synthetic environments, you'll find it very difficult. And that is a world away back in the 2000s after my early VPL days with that work. Anyway, I started off my first job in mining, sitting in a Sani hut. So I'm glad you mentioned Sanning. And I just looked up, I didn't even know what that word was, sitting there with those coal miners, because I used to throw the clay from the coal from the fuses of the dynamite sticks. So I sat at a tipple where it processed the coal, and then it put it onto the big, huge railroads that went off to Tennessee Valley Authority, which was a great creation of Roosevelt. And it's the TVA, like the ComSat Act, are two of the main wonderful pieces of legislation that our country created to create huge, massive infrastructure that the government helped de-risk. Anyway, I sat in those coal mining Sandy huts as a young kid with the guys who would pull me back from the, getting too close to the conveyor belts. So I just looked up Sandy Hut, Sandy Mining Equipment, Chinese company that specializes in mining and construction equipment. And so when Bruce said what he said with talking to Dan about the new property they're developing in Hollywood, I remembered, having done music for film and television in my first career, that so many in Hollywood, where do they go for financing if they can't get it through normal channels? And we all know that Hollywood financing is a mess. They go to China, right? So guys, Dan, Bruce, Long, Sany Mining Equipment is it's a well-known Chinese company that specializes in mining and construction equipment. Anyway, just a funding idea.
No, taken. Thank you, Kevin.
I know. I just wanted to say it because
no, I meant that sincerely. I did not mean that anyway, but sincerely. Thank you.
Yeah.
When we were teenagers, we used to run through the smelter near our town in Canada, and there would be splashes that would come out of the crucible, and we wait till they were cool enough and just put them in bags. We used to like collect them, and everyone's dad worked there, so it was like, that's fine. They can go and grab some, because their dads are working in haul trucks and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up surrounded by that. And in fact, we did a lot of simulation work for drill jumbo companies and underground mining. And, as I say, my brother drives a haul truck and operates a crane. And this is my humble skepticism around operations on worlds where you're, one other example, for one of our NASA SBIRs, we hired Harrison Schmitt, who was the geologist who went to the moon on Apollo 17. And he drove was it Cernan, 35 kilometers in the lunar roving vehicle. And Jack's consulting for us was like, we were designing lunar excavators, like bucket wheel type thing. And he said, you got a bunch of problems here. You got temperatures on the moon that are just going to fry your electronics, and then you're going to freeze your electronics and your butt off. We always landed at the moon at about 10 o'clock in the morning, lunar daytime, so that the ground temperature is around 65 Celsius. But we had to get out of there, and we parked the LRV in the shadow of the LEM so that the wax boxes that had melted would dump their heat. That was the technology to keep the LRV cool. And he was very skeptical about anyone proposing surface lunar human and robotic habitation or robotic operations that weren't buried. So we did a big project with Raytheon about teleoperated lunar base construction prior to human landing, including landing pads and the whole thing. So I've kind of been down that road, and it just gave me a healthy dose of skepticism about trying to do things and the dust alone. Jack told us that on his suit, there's like 17 layers or something like that in the lunar suit for Apollo. Said the outer 4 layers were scuffed off by the agglutinates acting as knives, cutting through my suit. And he did face plants on purpose to show the best way to walk. And he was dirty, absolutely dirty. And when they got back into the LEM and they lifted off, all the dust came up inside the compartment as they lifted off. And he said it smelled like gunpowder, spent gunpowder, because it hit the water that was from their breath, from the humidity. And he breathed it in, and he said, when I die, I want them to thin section my lungs because I'm carrying micrograms of lunar regolith in my lungs that'll still be there to this day. So all of that was like, man, the moon is a harsh mistress for trying to do operations. So as we see this moon rush thing going on, it's really tough. I think that we're going to see a lot of failed stuff on the surface, a lot of dead stuff on the surface of the moon. Hopefully not dead people, but a lot of dead equipment we'll be seeing there in the next few years.
You
Laura?
just read my mind on that quote, Bruce. I was thinking the moon is a harsh mistress, and the rest of
It
space
is.
is equally discouraging.
Uh,
Yeah, it's definitely tough stuff up there. I just want to comment, Bruce. You talked about me sort of trying to tease out some possibilities with For All Mankind. They have 7 seasons, and I'm trying to get into the inner circle of the producers after just working for Apple on my last show. But I also want to share an update that I don't think anybody knows is I've developed a show, and I've actually written SHEP into the show. So there's a breakthrough in quantum supercomputing and AI, and what happens is the AI actually starts to understand natural intelligence. And in the vein of sort of Dorian Sagan's biosphere, it actually looks at how life has evolved throughout the cosmos and kind of zooms down to where it's at on Earth. And there's this breakthrough. Instead of Elon's chip on the brain, this is a brain on the chip type thing. And so it actually gets to really feel through evolution on a very deep level and starts to help humanity create from that place. So this is the show that I've been developing in the background. There's some people at Apple that know about it. I have to register it with the AWA, so that's going to be happening this week. And I have 5 seasons fleshed out, but I've actually put SHEP into that because I've been working on this actively, and I'm thinking about it and dreaming and scheming with all of you. So there's this whole piece of this project. I call it like science fiction and science faction, that I'm sort of weaving these worlds together to kind of, imagine this future world that's possible. So just to let you know, if I can't get in with For All Mankind, I have SHEP written into this show that I'm about to register and begin pitching in the very near future. And a lot of it is weaving this work in. I'm taking my life's work and the things that I'm interested in, and I'm actually weaving it into the show to show where AI could go if it actually tapped into some of the understanding of just what kind of cosmic evolution is, what is light, what is life, and weaving that into here we are on Earth. How do we get out of this bottleneck as a species? So I'm dreaming about it in the show, working on it here. And so yeah, I just wanted to let you know that SHEP is playing itself out beautifully, kind of in this imaginarium state that I'm weaving in the show. So just a quick update on that piece.
Can I finish my comment? That's great.
Go ahead.
And I know, Lori, you're going to go. I wanted to say at the end of my comment, besides the connection of Greg to Contact and Aza and Bruce, Bruce also knew Brad Blair, and you may not have seen him mentioned on the original documents that worked on the team with Bruce, but he's connected all the way back to David Chevron and JSC. So there's this great connection. And then I want to say about the property you're developing, Aza, that's great, because I've told a few other people I would love nothing more than to watch a media property where the thrust and the conflict and the resolution is between those people building the infrastructure. We see the stuff about firefighters, we see the stuff about oil rigs, we see Wicked Catch. I forget what that's about, fishing, really. But these are, wonderfully rich environments in which to tell stories of the human struggle. So I'm glad you're doing that, Aza. Great.
Thank you.
Hey, Aza,
Yes.
if you need extras, here we are. Or actually leading men and ladies. We are all here. We're ready to be on your show.
All
right.
In here, I have grown up in a community which is full of the engineers from Project Paperclip. That was after the war, where the various and I lived amongst them. Actually, got a job at the factory in designing turbine engines, and so just funny jokes from there.
Lori has been super patient. So, Lori, what are your thoughts about
I'm
all of
just trying to figure out how to ask intelligent questions with this. My mind is in so many different directions. So going back to the concept of the creation of capturing and analyzing the meteor, the design concept, is it readily available? When would it be a reality? Then the second question goes into that concept. Is it a multiple tier concept where it can be used not only to analyze meteors, but other unknown foreign things or even trash debris? Is it also a space where it can also be utilized as somewhat of a maybe a manufacturing kind of element, depending on what is discovered and what is housed in that concept?
Yeah, all of the above, Lori, pretty much. One of the unique things is that when you introduce an atmosphere, you can decide what atmosphere you want to put around something. So if you wanted to go out to a satellite that was out of fuel or needed a part replaced, you could introduce a breathable atmosphere and people could literally go through the airlock and float over to it. You know, this is what Bigelow is trying to do, is to create a space hotel, a new space station with inflatables for people to experience the overview effect. Interestingly enough, this is in some ways where it comes back to your vision, Frank, and that an Earth atmosphere gives access to humans. So you could imagine that if we perfect the technology, various SHEPs throughout the solar system can give you overview effects of the moon from geostationary, from high up, kind of like a distant view. And SHEP would be fairly slow in where it could move, so people would visit potentially as almost like a space hotel, but it would be moving along. And as long as you had a gas supply, you'd be fine. And Lori, the other thing is, if you came up to an asteroid and you found that it had a lot of carbon in it, and a lot of them do, they have amino acids, they have carboxylic acids, they have the sooty stuff called aromatic hydrocarbons, and it was sort of got all this material, and some of this has already been found in asteroid sample return missions. You can turn it into this terrarium. So you can, or aquarium, if you will, but it could be a terrarium as well, because it would have some water on it and you could literally grow things on the surface. And to tell you some of the deeper history, in 2013, I was at a Ames workshop with our two-star general, who was the head of Ames, and he had this kind of crazy idea that we could take a Centaur upper stage out to an asteroid and attach it to it and try to figure out if we could grow stuff on it. You know, that was Pete Warden's sort of hand-waving idea. And I sat there and I started sketching, and I said, well, we don't need to take the Centaur upper stage. We just need to put a collection plate on the space station, collect micrometeorites that are flying past all the time, and take them through a gel that we could impact the gel, and then take it inside and see if we can grow something on it. And it turns out that actually works. Plants and bacteria, microbes, and algae will eat this stuff up. And if the origin of life was also dependent upon that same material falling on the Earth 4 billion years ago, getting into the soup ponds of these hot springs circulating, which we do. We go to New Zealand, we go to Yellowstone and Iceland, and we take up ground up powders of meteorites that are as old as the Earth. And we can form the little protocell units in the hot springs. It's this breathtaking science, actually. It sort of closes the loop. So those carbonaceous asteroids may be our future in space, because life is naturally able to consume it and convert it. A carbonaceous type chondrite, for example. And that's just one of many, many types. So I hope that answers your question.
All right. That is really interesting. David.
Yeah, and on the subject of the interconnections and so forth in the group, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Brad Blair's kids, Laura's Laura's mother, Jacqueline Laughlin, has been on the ORT for a while, but his kids are the inspiration for trying to do a kids or juniors ORT. And that was to see what we could try to do to help out with Laura being able to raise their kids. But another connection, I guess you've probably met the folks at the Space Portal at Ames. You probably worked with them, right? Dan Rasky, Lynn Harper, and so forth. So Brad, I got Brad to do a proposal for the Space Portal, which we involved one of our students from the Space Settlement Design Competition who had been through the competition 6 times, having won 2 of them twice in high school and come back to the international. And then, so she was our student assistant for one that Brad and I did for the portal on multi-commodity ISRU processing and public-private partnerships. So there's all kinds of interesting little interconnections, I think, just,
One last story, Dave, that I didn't relate, which was in my actual TEDx talk 10 years ago, was the final impetus for SHEP came with me standing at NASA Ames in the middle of the night with Brad Blair after drinking way too much of Don Scott's scotch and looking up at the flashing light on Hangar 1. And it suddenly came to me, good scotch is almost hallucinogenic, but it suddenly came to me that Brad, I said to him, what if that flashing light that's on NASA Ames was a comet that got captured in the Earth-Moon system and was orbiting the Earth-Moon system, and it was burning off material. You could actually see the tail. And Brad turned to me and he said, every spacefaring nation would be trying to get their hands on that because it would make all the difference. We'd have 1 million tons of water ice, CO2, you name it, immediately available. It would open space. It would be the solution. And of course, as we all know, Brad was a big sort of lunar mining proponent and had done a ton of work on it. And I turned to him and I said, what would we do? And Brad said, we have to enclose it somehow to moderate the temperature. And of course, there'd be jets firing off, so it would be a tricky operation. But once we enclosed it, we could then start to take those vapors and start turning them in, filling tanks, doing the extraction. And I said to Brad, well, why don't we learn how to do that? Why don't we work a way to do that? We just have to go a little farther out. And that's how Brad got involved in the project, because he and I had been working on lunar bucket wheel excavators with Michael Duke at Colorado School of Mines. And so we kind of created this whole thing, and he was one of the authors of the New Space paper as a result. So toward the end of the talk here, I want to dedicate this project to Brad Blair, the memory of Brad Blair.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm dedicating the Earth Space Conservation Demonstration Center to memory of Brad Blair and Anita Gale.
Amazing.
Well,
Amazing.
also, this has not been announced, so kind of keep it to yourself. But all of that led to Kevin Russell's idea of the overview roundtable for young people. And the Human Space Program actually has received a grant for a pilot project to do just that, overview roundtable for young people. Wait for it, in virtual reality. So we'll probably do a presentation on that here, and we will be announcing it soon. But yeah, we are interconnected. I think that's the whole point of the overview effect, really. We're all connected. We're interconnected. Everything is connected. So this is a great session to show that this is true. I think it might be useful for Greg, who's been leading the charge on this, to talk about what the heck is a charrette And why are we doing a charrette? And how will that lead to what Bruce is talking about?
Well, essentially, the next stage in trying to realize a proof of concept is to lay out a mission. And in order to do that, you want to bring together the experts that you need in all of the different fields to create a mission that would demonstrate or at least learn a lot of techniques that would be required for this encapsulation process of creating this balloon that can extract safely the contents of items floating in space. So I think that is the direction, is having a workshop, which, in the I believe it was late 19th century, the charrette notion came up in architecture, where when people were making architectural designs, they were making models and carrying them around for the final exhibition, when the charrette used to come and pick up the models and take them all for review by the luminaries of the day. So we're talking about literally bringing all the folks together. The notion of charrette has been revived for a lot of community planning efforts. There's now a National Charrette Institute, which I believe is in Michigan, affiliated with an academic institution. And the idea seemed appropriate for this because really this is a citizen authored approach where you bring together a lot of folks who are going to be looking at a basic solution to a new endeavor in space. Bring these folks together for a concentrated period of time where they're focused only on this very simple proof of concept mission that Bruce has outlined with Peter Janiskins. And I believe Brad also contributed to that paper where it outlines what they have in mind and translate that into the actual detailed steps that you need to work on to create a proof of concept small mission. And I think Bruce in his slides had that at the stage where it was sort of after simulation, and there's actually going to be a CubeSat technical mission as the objective, the first CubeSat mission to try to encapsulate a body that's nearby in either near Earth orbit or even a satellite orbit of the Earth. So those are all the factors: identifying the target, identifying what you need to bring up to a new technology readiness level, what are the different things that you need to achieve there, and then that can become the basis for a request for proposals for such a mission, and also for potential funding.
So we're making progress in that direction, I believe.
Well, I think the steps that Bruce outlined, the immediate steps where we are seeking favorable reception from the folks who have been doing work in this area and who gather as the Space Resources Roundtable in Golden, Colorado periodically. I know it was, I believe it was almost annual until COVID hit. And where Bruce has presented this idea or concept in a paper previously, going back to that same area and saying, we feel like a lot of the experts who would have the requisite knowledge to come together would be meeting anyway, and to see if we could generate some enthusiasm from that side and some funding potential as well through their connections to make such an event happen and to create and document, create the final work breakdown structure for that mission. So I think that's it's in gear. I hope that it gets some traction, and I think we might be getting a gravity assist from Angel, who's been very instrumental in that community and had a very receptive frame of mind around in our last conversation. So we're presenting the paper as a simple one pager right now, and so that's kind of something that's available if anybody wants to see that. I'm not sure if Bruce or Aza finished their editorial on it, but we do have that for reference if anybody wants to see what the concept's about.
Did they get in touch with you to get the one pager? Or who would they talk to?
If
Kevin?
everyone's, well, Bruce, Aza, did you all have a chance to look at it last night? If you're all ready, I could share the public link, but if you're not, we will wait.
Yeah, I think you could go ahead and share it. And
Okay.
I was going to do some ongoing edits later, but I got absorbed getting the slides ready for y'all.
Okay. I have
Yeah,
it here.
drop it as a version 1, I think would be great, just to have. I don't think there's going to be too many refinements.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay.
Is Lori still on the call? Because I just wanted to make a comment. One of the things that came out is low-hanging fruit. You see that in the description, is literally space debris and satellite servicing would be kind of the starting point. Goes back to Greg and the whole intention behind the charrette is to do kind of, I keep calling it the steps of SHEP, technical and economic feasibility, but the low-hanging fruit would be really where we start. And that space of space debris is literally going to stop or blockade so many of our efforts unless we clean up our LEO mess. So I see SHEP as being this amazing beginning to start to clean up and be more responsible kind of in that the low early phase of our expansion into the solar ecosystem starts by cleaning up our own planet. So I'd love to get more, once this gets refined, I really think I want to bring this to Morava, Ja, and the work that he's doing, because I know he's working with Steve Wozniak, and they have a company called Wayfinder where they're actually looking at and creating an inventory of all the space junk and debris. So I see that as kind of being one place that we go next once we have more of the technical and economic feasibility of what SHEP step 1 would be, even if it's just for small encapsulation of little bits of space debris, larger bits of space debris. So yeah, step by step. I mean, how do you eat a cosmic elephant one bite at a time?
Aza, thank you for saying that, because that's kind of where my mind triggered immediately. I mean, everybody's like, oh, it's going to be X amount of years. Sorry, there's peacocks and trucks rolling around my back window here for the noise. But the reality is space debris is real. We need the solutions. We need somewhere where we can collect these items. We need somewhere where we can, in some sort of sense, fabricate this junk that we have. And I know David and I and Kevin and others that are attached to his project in New Hampshire are recyclable plastics. And I didn't know that plastic is something that is important for, what's the word, David? I've lost the word. If I'm going to go to space, I'm going to catch on fire. Radioactivity, right? Plastic.
Yeah, you can use plastic for radiation shielding. But
Yeah.
hey, I wanted to bring up real quick, this idea of trying to manage the debris. Dumping it into the atmosphere is turning out to look like a kind of a bad idea. NOAA has done some studies and finding that the metallic particles from dumping stuff in the atmosphere is just not really good. That's driven the Japanese wood satellite design, for example. But if you can do something to try to keep all this stuff from not only being orbital debris hazard, but to collect it and not have to dump it in the atmosphere, that would be a big plus.
And one of the parties that we contacted back in 2018 was a contact at Munich Re, so that's Munich Reinsurance. And it turns out in a lot of these international launches, there's literally a requirement to deal with your satellite after its end of life. And that's actually baked in some of the insurance itself. And Munich Re is the largest insurer, I believe, for space launches. And the fellow there was saying, if we had a technology even on the horizon that could guarantee this, a service, we would be willing to, not only start talking about it, but pointing both the international organizations, the launch companies, the customers in this way, we'd get behind it. Because then we could actually viably say that there is a path that we can require this handling to be done. So even from the finance insurance side, there's sort of a motivation there. The second thing, which is Starlink, when Starlink satellites end of life, what happens to them? We know where they are. They're in LEO, and could we actually pre-launch SHEP sat? This is a funny thing that came up yesterday between Greg and Aza as we were looking at the acronym. It occurred to me that it could become a verb. Instead of go get that, go SHEP that.
Shepping it.
Shepping it. Let's instead of schlepping it, we're shepping it. Anyhow, so you could have basically, it's kind of a space tug. It's sort of a space dumpster. If you're able to scale quite large, you're able to do multiple rendezvous. One of the things, Lori, that's a problem is that you have these things they're like moving like bullets. So they're going to go through, you have to actually match them exactly and then capture them. And then you can change their velocity, change their direction. But you could potentially capture multiple, especially the larger stuff. You want to capture a kind of big heavy thing that's an impact that could strike another thing and create a lot of other little bits and pieces. But the technology, I think, is going to be very cheap because it's Vectran balloon fabric. It's a simple, well-proven spacecraft body. You have to have a gas supply, both to run the engines and to do the controlling gas. They could be the same gas. And as long as you have that gas supply, they just keep working for years and years and years. And you can have them parked all over LEO and up to GEO and just have them there. And it's a company that helps with the reinsurance. It helps, secure things that could collide with things. It helps move things out of the way of other things. And it also is a destination, can you imagine? We capture some really fancy, fun thing. Like, for instance, one of the lunar lander, pod houses is going to pass the Earth. I think was it Apollo 13 is one of them, has been orbiting the sun in its own trajectory. What if we go and capture that in a SHEP enclosure, and then that becomes a destination for people to go see it? It's sort of like a museum. There it is, a 1972 lunar landing. Top of Lamb is there, and people go and they get the overview. In fact, they get to there's a plaque on it, and stuff.
I have another
How
idea.
about an international space station? Could you do one big enough to capture that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could actually capture that and relocate it and make
we just NSS just published our position paper on deorbiting the ISS and recommended NASA keep their options open for different ways that it could be reutilized, could be repurposed, recycled, reutilized. So,
well, David, that's a good point, because if, say, Mir or space stations, they get out of date, they get seal breaches and all kinds of things. So instead of deorbiting them, you just SHEP them and change their orbit. Now, that's a massive object. And then you go in with a crew and you just it's like putting in the garage. You go in there and start fixing things. Take it apart inside the enclosure, take the problematic parts out.
I had a proposal I'd worked on at one time that everything that was launched would be designed specifically to be able to be reused, to be, once its initial purpose and function had been completed, its mission completed, it would be designed specifically for being able to be reassembled, reused, that sort of thing.
I think this group, Frank, is meeting its mission as a creative mind. It's already upgraded our thinking and some beautiful imaginative ideas.
I have one more usage for your concept. When it's mass migration in space, it could help find the lost wandering children or those with Alzheimer's that get on the wrong path and get lost in space. You can have that human.
Yeah.
That's good.
One thing I would add to your idea about the ISS, David, I was thinking the same thing. I seriously think it would be worth talking to Rick Tumlinson about this. He is leading the sort of rhetorical opposition to deorbiting, but I don't want to speak for him, but I don't think he has a real alternative. So seriously, I think that might be a good conversation.
Yeah, that would be good to discuss.
Yeah.
'Cause actually, there's a bit of a false narrative that's out there about the station reaching its end of life. It was actually designed for indefinite life with maintenance.
Right.
That was an original requirement. My team actually proposed that and got that in the specs for it back in Phase B. Although that life was changed to 10 years after assembly complete because a lot of the contractors either couldn't figure out or didn't want to try to figure out or figured out there was a benefit to them not to certify it that way. The design philosophy was that everything on it can be replaced or can be in situ maintained. So, this whole thing about wasn't designed for this, it's not really true.
Yeah. And remember, Jared Isaacman made the bold proposal that he could lead a team to go fix, I think it was Hubble, right?
Hubble. Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you got some support for this and say, hey, we actually could fix it. I don't know. I mean, I think Jared is going to be open to new ideas. So
I think the reality of that is the government needs to know how to blow up things in space for the future of war. And I think that is a contract of how do we destroy things in space. That's my own assessment on that. I would like to save it.
I don't think that's it. I think they just want to cannibalize it and get the budget for it to do other things. They've been talking about trying to figure out a way to get that off their books since at least 2004 when I worked in the advanced development office, and the deputy chief of that office was trying to strategize how to kill station.
One other little blip came to me, which was in the comments, was pointed out that a laptop costs more as dense electronics than a CubeSat launch cost. The costs are coming down so much. Can you imagine that the launch tomorrow, I think, of Starship 7 is going to do, Starship's actually going to release some simulated Starlinks, like just Starlink bodies, I think. And then they're going to follow it into re-entry. So they're going to do not a deployment because they're not really ready for that. But can you imagine Starship is, now a satellite launching platform. Can you imagine the size and scale of a SHEP test from Starship itself? We could do a very large enclosure. So we might be able to do the jump from, talking Elon and giving us a couple of low-cost rides for our CubeSat testing up to like 8U or something. And then just let's pack a Starship with a very large SHEP and take it around, because put enough gas on it, it can go places. Have gas will travel. Have space suit will travel, and let's play around with it. And larger and larger objects, visit multiple objects over many years. Clearly, you'd have to have it all mapped out. But this is for the mid-30s. This is not implausible. And then you have your targets. You have asteroid materials coming near the Earth. you start to do orbit determination missions to figure out like Trojan objects and Apollo objects and all kinds of things. And we're ready to go and try. We've done 20 or 30 visitations, delta V's on satellites or debris. It's been visited by crew. Now let's go get a natural object within the solar system that's close by. Just not implausible by the end of the 30s.
I wanted to say,
great, everybody. I personally have a hard stop at 2. Does somebody want to take over for the after hours? Somebody want to be the host? Or
I think I have to also make my exit as well in the next 5 minutes.
well,
I can hold it open. I may not be able to participate much,
I'll
but I
make
can
you
hold it
host.
open. Yeah, go ahead.
Bruce, terrific. And HSP is proud to be working with you on this. And maybe we'll change the name to the Human SHEP program. I don't know. Anything could happen here.
One thing which Peter Janiskins and I agreed when we heard the terrible news of Julian's death. We said the first large and capable SHEP spacecraft will be called the HMS Knot.
Very, very cool.
And here's another little connection for you. I'm writing a Substack article now, and Aza knows about it because he's seen the draft, but it's how the first aircraft may give us our future in space. And it talks about the balloonists in the 18th century in Paris who created the first balloon flights, and how this could also be our future in space. And not only was Julian the greatest balloon designer, but Peter Janiskins, he turned to me at one point and said, and I'm Dutch, and my entire family was involved in the Dutch shipping industry, basically using a fabric to capture wind to explore the earth and open trade throughout the earth. This is my family heritage. And for me, in this Peter's words, it is very satisfying that we may have come up with a sailing ship for space to open the solar system. So I think I'll leave you with that. The very poetic and beautiful touches on this whole design.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Getting ready to set sail again and anew.
Thank you, Bruce. That was a very inspiring presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you all, and I hope we can see the recording as keep that as a historical artifact somewhere.
We have it.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bye.
Thank you. Great day. Talk to you soon. Kevin, are you gonna hang on for a little bit? I just gotta run.
Yeah, I'll just keep it open. I guess Frank assigned me the host. How do you check? It doesn't say host, but I don't know. I guess
it says your host. Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't see it on my side. Yeah. Well, that's great, that last bit of trivia about the Dutch, because the Dutch created the word for yacht, which I sent to John Spencer. And space yachts, or the merchant. I learned many years ago reading a big book about sailing the world that it was really, boats or ships in the merchant class were used for trade. And the Dutch were so prolific. They were the ones who created the first concept of, well, what if we had ships that weren't used for merchant activities? And so they created the whole concept of a yacht, which they actually made for the King of England. Anyway, I sent that whole history to John Spencer so it's great that it goes all the way back to Julian Knot and fabric, so that's an incredible piece of trivia.
And the Dutch also for many years had the fastest human conveyance on the planet by inventing the ice boat, by putting skates on a boat. And until the invention of the internal combustion engine, there was nothing faster.
Oh, wow. What's that called? I gotta look that up. That's
ice boat.
Ice boat.
Years ago, I wrote a treatment for a movie about during the Renaissance, the big industrial advancement was in Northern Europe was oil paint. And so I wrote the story about an industrial spy who goes from Italy to the Netherlands to become an apprentice for the master of Flamal, who's has the oldest oil painting, which is housed in the cloisters in New York City today, and the ending concludes with a big fight on ice boats streaming through the frozen canals of Amsterdam.
Wow. I love that idea. I don't
And
think
if
you
you've
can go
ever
wrong
been
with a
on an
movie.
ice boat, they're really fun.
Yeah, I see that the Dutch Ice Club de Robin continues to preserve the tradition of organizing annual trips to Sweden for ice sailing holidays, showcasing their historic ice boats.
Yeah, and Wisconsin and the northern Midwest states still have that, and some of the newer ice boats are like super high tech, but it's the same thing.
Oh, that is great. Well, hey, David, another activity for New Hampshire.
We'll have to talk about that a little bit.
Because you've got
Do
lots
it
of
on
ice.
Lake Winnipesaukee.
One more idea to look at and consider how to fit that in.
Oh, before I go, let me show you something. I actually have a real piece of the moon that a honcho at the National Science Foundation gave me, and this little speck is actually a piece of moon dust.
Moon dust. Now, if you add water, I hear it smells like gunpowder.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that before.
Yeah, it looks like a nugget of ossified nasal secretion, but it's a mineral.
It's interesting, Dan, because just last night I was talking to a meteorite collector I know, and he said he can get lunar meteorites pretty cheaply right now because he buys them in large quantities. So I'm thinking of buying